rad. Okay. So I get lots of questions about, and I talk about this with patients all the time about building muscle. There's a bunch of things out that I kind of want to kind of go over real quick. So when we talk about the lifting portion of building muscle, there's a couple different things we got to keep kind of in mind. One, people always talk about like, oh, you got to lift as heavy as you can, as few reps as possible. That's the only way to build muscle. That is a fantastic way to build muscle, but it's also a really awesome way of tearing ligaments and tendons and damaging joints and screwing yourself up long term. Probably the worst exercise I can think about for this would be kettlebell swings. Next would be barbell laden squats, like put the bar across your back and do squats with it. Doing that really, really heavy is going to damage your spine. I've seen it 1,000 times. If you want to do it that way, get a hip belt and do it that way. It's the same exact motion. It is better for every one of your joints. So I would look at doing it that way. Compressing the spine is not the best option out there. If you're an Olympic lifter, totally different thing. All right. The big thing you've got to do when you're trying to grow muscle tissue is convince the body that it's not good enough the way it is. That's why your body changes. Not because you want it to, not because you've taken enough protein, because you've convinced your body it's not good enough the way it is. And the way you do that is by failure. So they were talking about like ticket to failure. That's the ticket. That's the whole thing. So whether you're lifting really heavy because you can only lift it 3 times and you fail in your 4th rep, you fail. But you also put the body under really, really intense stress it does not need to have. Now, if you did that, let's say 10 times, you find a weight that you can do 10 or 11 times and you failed on that. You're going to get the same function out of that, but you're going to have a lot less damage to the ligament, the tendon, and the joint. So if you're thinking, I want to have this long term, or I actually want to have an entire year where I can train. I've got so many guys that I see, and women, that I see that keep lifting really heavy and damage their body. Oh, I sprained this, or I tore that, or, I tweaked this, and so I couldn't lift for 3 or 4 weeks. You take 3 or 4 weeks off the gym. I don't care how fast you're building muscle. You take a month off. It's not as good as going, half as fast the entire year. So, doing things that have a higher chance of injury are going to give you a worse prognosis long term. So find that weight that you can do 8, 9, 10, 12 times, and then you fail. But again, the point is you're failing to lift the weight. Now, the best way to do this is to get a weight you can do 10, 12 times, fail on that 12th one, drop the weight, drop down 20 or 30%, go till you fail again, drop that weight, go down 30%, and do that until you fail. If you start doing drop sets like that to failure each time, that's the fastest way to grow. Because again, your body was like, oh, I can't do that much. And then it was like, oh, I also can't do that much. And it was like, oh, I also can't do that much. And a lot of times people will be like, well, that's not how you build big muscle. That's how you build toned muscle. So the difference between toned muscle and big muscle is the amount of fat you're carrying over the top of it or the amount of inflammatory water weight you're carrying, one of the two. Because 5 pounds of muscle is 5 pounds of muscle. So if you want, the reason that the higher rep thing is more associated with tone is because oftentimes when you're lifting that way, what you're also doing is convincing the body that it doesn't produce enough energy to maintain the function of that muscle tissue. Well, what's it going to do? It's going to build more mitochondria. It's going to increase the mitochondrial density so that it can provide more energy for your muscle tissue. Again, all the way back to quit looking at this calories in, calories out nonsense. Your body makes all of the energy it has. You don't eat it. You literally build it and make it inside your body. Once you understand the chemistry of that, everything starts making sense. Now, here's the thing. If your body is constantly making more energy, you don't have to move nearly as much for your body to require more building blocks for that energy. So it will then reach out and utilize more fat or sugars to produce this energy. Now, if you then move yourself into a diet where you're burning fat as your primary fuel source, your body's going to be burning fat all day long. So what ends up happening is that you end up looking more ripped. You end up looking more toned. People are like, yeah, but you're smaller. That's your call. If you're like, hey, I've got 10 pounds of muscle with 10 pounds of fat over it, if that's the look you want, go for it. That's awesome. That's a super easy thing to maintain. If you're like, no, I just want to see the muscles, I want to see the veins, I want to see the striations in the muscle tissue, you're going to have to strip all the fat off of it. And you're going to get smaller because once fat leaves, it's, you're lighter and smaller. So that's a thing. But it depends on what you want. Like, do you want big muscles, or do you want really pretty muscles that are toned and cut properly? It's entirely up to you how you want to play it. But most of the time, your strength's going to be about the same. It just depends on how much fat you're carrying. So that's kind of the difference in the two. If you're going to start lifting, so like for instance, what I do is, because my workout's a little bit more based on long-term function, and I am about as big as I want to be. Mine is now cutting down the fat and maintaining all the muscle tissue. So I've lost, it's been, I think it's 16 pounds in the past, since the 10th. And so it's funny because people are like, you look leaner, but you look bigger, which is, I think, hilarious. So that's what I always hear. So that's kind of one of those things where you're going to look, if you trim out right, if you lean down right, and you have the basic structure of the muscle, you're going to end up looking, really, really good. Kind of like the way most people are wanting to look. They're going to look, solid and not squishy, not jiggly, but that's kind of where they're going to go. But you're going to have to build muscle tissue for this. So a lot of people think, oh, if I just lost the fat, I'd be ripped. No, you're not. You're not ripped. You might have more muscle. You might have a little bit more visibility of your muscle tissue if you lost all the fat. But until you build the muscles to be seen, you're not going to see them. So you've got to build the muscle tissue. But there's tons of research where this falls into the category of research that didn't need to be done. But there's a whole bunch of research out that says, if you have more muscle tissue, you're healthier and you live longer. Well, of course you do. Because guess where all your mitochondria is? Guess where 90% of your metabolic function happens? It happens in muscle tissue. Fat tissue is not metabolically active, or it's very, very, very low on the metabolic function. So, that's where all your stuff is. Plus, if you fall down, the best cushion you have isn't fat, it's muscle tissue. So that's going to be a big deal. And if and then not falling down is also very, very important. So, as you age, the workout you do is going to highly depend upon how well you're going to function as you get older. And the stronger you are when you're 50, the chances are the more mobility and functionality you're going to have when you're 60, 70, and 80, just because of, you've had the tissue. So building muscle tissue is really, really important no matter what age you're in. When we talk about bone density, again, what makes the body change? Teaching the body that it's not good enough the way it is. Weight-bearing exercise, muscle tissue growth, or just having muscle tissue when you're younger. If you guys are 35-year-old women, 30-year-old women, 40-year-old women, and you don't want to have osteoporosis issues, when you're older, train now, build the muscle tissue now. Because as you move around and carry things and lift things, the muscle tissue is also pulling on ligaments and tendons, so it's pulling on the bone. That compressive forces when you're lifting, compressing the bone, telling the bone, hey, you better not be too weak because you're going to fracture. So giving it that input that says, you've got to be at least X strong is a good idea. So there is no real downside to building the muscle tissue. Now, when we're doing these workouts, and I'm trying to compress like a month's worth of information in just 10 minutes, but the other thing is that you need to make sure that you're moving in a full, complete range of motion. Now, I get it. Going down to parallel is a green light for Olympic lifting. Again, if you're an Olympic lifter, fantastic. Train to that level. If you're a normal human being who's not competing in Olympic lifting, then you need to train at the full range of motion. If your butt will go to your heels, you need to squat down where your butt hits your heels. If you're thinking one day your knees might go over your toes, you need to train your ankles to be stable and functional and your knees to be stable and functional in that movement. So you need to train in the movements of life, which is why I'm a really big fan of single leg step-ups. Because you want the right leg to be able to go all the way up and all the way down and carry your entire body weight, balance, coordinate, and function, right leg and then left leg. So, as you're doing those full ranges of motion that you're going to need to do as you get older, steps, stairs, slips, falls, all those sort of things, that balance and coordination is really, really beneficial. It's funny because people always ask me, what do you bench? I have not done bench press in over 10 years because it is a terrible exercise. Because it is not good for chest and it's not good for triceps, but for some reason it is considered the greatest exercise everybody does. You're going to get half the range of motion on your chest and you're going to get 60% of the range of motion on your tricep. So it's actually a much better tricep exercise than it is bench exercise, which is why if you want to increase your bench, build your triceps, and you're going to help your bench press a whole lot more. But it's a limited range of motion for the chest. It's not going to shape it up like a flywheel, or a deep dip. So again, what is the range of motion? Go to the largest range of motion, and then restrict that range of motion and go to failure. So those pieces are big. Now we could walk through all the dietary things you need. We talk about all the time. We could walk through all the sleep you need. We talk about all the time. But from a lifting standpoint, we need to go to failure. I would recommend that you don't do as heavy as weight as you can. You need to go safe range of motion with a full range of motion. And, that's kind of the big thing. So if you look at your exercises and you're going, oh, I am not taking this muscle to its full range of motion. Then once you get to the full range of motion, make sure that every time you do it, you fail. So that's kind of where we got to go. Now, if at the end of the day, you go, oh, okay, we're going full range of motion and then we're failing. Great. If you go, well, I can't fail at 12. I need to go up in weight. That's fine. Or just do one more. Like I always tell people, like if you do 12, do more. If when you get to 15 or so, okay, now go up in weight and go back down. But again, the goal is to go to failure as long as you're trying to build tissue. Now, if you're trying to maintain it, it's a little bit different approach. But if you're trying to build it, you want to convince the body that you need something more. Otherwise, your body's going to be super efficient and not grow. So take it to failure, and that'll teach you that it needs to grow. So that's kind of the big thing. But again, like I said, full range. If you guys have any other questions, hit us up, questions@chalmerswellness.com, or we'll talk to you in the comments. Have a good day.